Okay, good. Yay! All right, so I can't see anyone other than Nads right now for whatever reason, but I don't want to touch anything. I just want to say good morning, Wealth Queens. As you can see, I am en route to the airport in the beautiful city of New York. Hopefully you can all see something there. But I did not want, I had to change my flight, unfortunately. And so I wanted to honor that we had scheduled this call because it is so amazing that this beautiful goddess who's going to be sharing with you this morning was a part of Wealth Ascension Collective um, in March earlier this year. And I just did not fully understand what she did until we met in person in Atlanta and she gave me her book. I could not sleep that night. I read the entire thing. A few days went by and I called her and said, okay, how do we work something out so you can come back to the community and share this wisdom and knowledge and the particular way that she has documented it? I think you're all going to love. So we're talking about quantum wealth. And before I have Coach Nads let Asia on, I'm also going to say she is very passionate about um, sharing this wisdom with those that are in high school or colleges. She really wants to get this information out to the next generation. So if there's any of you that have any contacts that can get her into schools or higher education programs, I know she would be very grateful. You can reach out to her directly or just ask me and I'll make the connection. All right, so without further ado, can we have Asia come on, please?
Asia is on. Yes, ma'am. Thank you guys for having me. Tasha, I appreciate you very much. And one of the things that attracted me to Tasha's work was her approach to this wealth building and financial consciousness conversation. As you guys know, being in the Wealth Ascension Collective, her approach embodies a lot of the feminine power and the spiritual aspect to building wealth. And so I feel like our works complement each other because I feel like I kind of have a more masculine, logical approach to it. Not saying that spirituality isn't logical, but just understanding they're two sides to the same coin. So without further ado, let's get started because this presentation will likely take the entire 56 minutes that we have. So I'll go ahead and share screen and we'll get started. And also know that while I have the presentation up, I can't see the group. And so if you have any questions or thoughts, comments, ideas, feel free to either put it in the chat or Coach Nads, if you want to pause me to read something that seems timely, or if you just want to come off mute, I'm cool with that.
I'll support you there, Asia.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's get the presentation started. All right, can you guys see the full presentation screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so quantum wealth theory. That is what we're going to be exploring today. We have a short agenda here. We're going to talk about this quantum wealth universe. I like to start with a little story time because it helps us to kind of take ourselves out of the traditional money conversation. Because if you guys know, sometimes in our society, this money conversation can be taboo, you know, depending on what your personal beliefs are. It can be uncomfortable sometimes. And so I like to set the foundation and start with a little story so that we're all speaking the same language. And then, as you can see here, these are the topics we're going to go through, but let's just go ahead and go through them. Okay, so if you will indulge me, I would like for you to close your eyes and just imagine this story, this picture that I'm going to paint for you. Imagine you were born in another galaxy called the quantum wealth universe. Out of the thousands of other planets, your home planet is the only one where every citizen is born with a personalized rocket ship. This rocket ship is used to travel and get around your hometown. And your personal rocket ship is fueled by a unique power source that only the owner can generate. Installed in each vehicle is a unique program, one that's designed to navigate only around its home planet. Even though there are ways to upgrade this default program so you can travel to other planets, there is no official Rocket Ships 101 class, so most citizens never learn how to properly use, maintain, or upgrade their vehicles. So one day after work, while you're hanging out with some friends, you see something that you've never seen before. It's a rocket flying far out beyond your home planet. And considering nobody that you know have ever expressed their desire to leave the home planet, much less actually travel to other worlds, this sight makes you wonder, what else is out there? And what would it be like to explore these other planets? So for the first time, you start to think about your own rocket ship and wonder if it has the capabilities to travel, so you too can explore and see what's out there to experience. So ever since this day, you've been obsessed with learning how to upgrade your operating system and redesign your rocket ship. So where do you start? First, you'll need to upgrade your default operating system. This will allow you to navigate to destinations outside of your home planet. Next, you'll learn to study the engine and the other systems so that you can understand the basics of your current vehicle model. Starting with understanding the best fuel source for your vehicle. Just in case it breaks down somewhere, you'll need to know where to start troubleshooting. And then lastly, you'll need to outline a clear flight plan so that you know exactly where you're aiming to go. So now that you've done the work in researching and learning all about rocket ships, you can map out this route to your desired destinations. And with your new upgraded vehicle, new operating system, you can travel confidently knowing that you can course correct. You can always course correct along the way. This is the quantum wealth universe. Now imagine your body as a rocket ship, your brain as your operating system, your heart as your engine, and your emotions as your fuel source. This is the financial vehicle you were born with that allows you to travel and explore other planets and ways of life. Learn how to be the captain, mechanic, and engineer of your priceless rocket ship. The end. Thank you guys for participating. So we've set the foundation. We're just going to continue to build on these concepts. And again, feel free to jump in at any time. So, oh, look at that, Coach Nats. Okay, so I like to start with defining some terms. So as we communicate here today, we're all speaking the same language. And so I like to use the term financial empowerment because, as we'll discuss, simple financial literacy is not enough to actually have us reaching our financial goals. And I'll tell you exactly why I believe that. So first, financial literacy. We'll define this as the understanding of financial terminology, understanding of the products and strategies, and how they can benefit someone and lead them to their financial goals. That is financial literacy. On the other side of that coin, we have financial empowerment, which is defined as the intimate understanding of your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and overall relationship with money. Financial empowerment encourages one to be proactive with their financial decisions, bringing a sense of peace and confidence around financial matters. So let's dig into this financial empowerment one more time. Here I have it broken down into 4 aspects that makes up this financial empowerment puzzle picture. So number 1, financial literacy is in there. It is important. I'm not here to discount understanding financial products and terminology, because ultimately, once you decide what your goals are and what's the best route for you, it will help you to understand how these financial products work. And then number 2, having flexible beliefs. As we'll discuss today, we're going to be talking about the conscious beliefs that we have, that we know we have, like, I know I want to make more money to live my desired life. But we're also going to talk about some of the subconscious beliefs that are below the surface that we may not always recognize are there. And so we need these flexible beliefs, because if we discover something in that subconscious that doesn't align with our goals, then we're going to need to be flexible as we start to reprogram those. Third, we're going to need mental awareness. Maybe this should come second, because in order to recognize those subconscious beliefs, we're going to have to take a step back, take some of the emotion out of it, maybe some of the judgment, shame, or guilt, and just be aware of the thoughts as they come through, and be aware of the feelings as we have them. And then lastly, we're starting to understand what we think, what we feel. Now we're going to have to bring in this emotional intelligence to make sure that, number one, we're giving ourselves grace and not beating ourselves up and bringing in more of those negative emotions when something comes up that we don't like. And so just having the emotional intelligence to deal with this stuff as we proceed to reach our financial goals. So those are the 4 pieces to financial empowerment. Okay, so let me take one step back just to tell you a little bit about me and how I got to this conversation, okay? Because we're talking about, in this slide, wealth mentality versus poverty mentality. Growing up, my mom, she was a single mom. She had 2 kids. And what I know now in hindsight, I grew up with a strong poverty mentality. And that's because my mom, her experience was, we don't have enough, we can't afford it. Those people, they can have the nice things and have fun, but we can't because we don't have it. I grew up hearing that. So ultimately that became my programming. And so I remember it was my 9th birthday. I went to the mailbox to collect my birthday cash. I knew my grandparents and my dad had sent me some money. So I go to the mailbox, I come back with like a couple $100. And, this is in 1998, so a couple $100 in 98, was doing pretty good for myself. And so I remember I come back to the house excited to show my mom what I had just racked up. And she politely told me, Asia, I'm going to need to borrow some money to pay the light bill that was past due. And so, this is nothing new, her borrowing money. She said she was going to pay me back like she always did. And so I was an understanding, relatively logical 9-year-old. So I obliged. And what I know now, what this experience taught me, I know Tasha talks about some of the money traumas. For me, this experience taught me that I started to hoard money, because I felt like there was always going to be some external factor, some external force that was going to come in and take over my money. So I started to hoard money. I became a good saver. That's what it looked like on the outside. I was good at saving money. But what that really was me being scared to spend money because I didn't know if it was going to come back. And so my mom saw that, me being a good saver, and she told me, Asia, you're good with money. So you should go to school, get the degrees, learn about money, and get the good job so that you don't have to struggle like we did. And so I did. The programming for me was deep. So I did what they said. I got my bachelor's in accounting, got my master's in finance. I finished those in 2014. Also, let me just say, I'm 35 years old. I like to say that up front because people ask and I realize they do math in their head. So I'm 35, okay? So graduated with my master's in finance in 2014. I moved to Atlanta that next year in 2015, bought my house a year later in 2016. And so at that time in 2016, on paper, one would look and assume that I had reached the American dream, the house, the job, the degrees. And so fast forward one more year, the year was 2017, and I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing basketball. And it was going to cost me $5,000 of out-of-pocket expenses to pay for this surgery. $5,000, which I didn't have savings for. Even though I had the good job and all the disposable income to myself, I wasn't making any progress on my financial goals. I wasn't saving. I was going to brunch every weekend, living my best life. Matter of fact, when I bought the house, I took a line of credit out to do the walls and the floors because the lady had dogs and the wall paint color was just terrible. So I had to do it, $7,000 right out the gate. And while I had every intention on paying that $7,000 down within a year, by the time the Achilles came, I didn't make any progress on that balance. Matter of fact, it probably increased, if I'm being really honest. Just was not paying attention to my goals. So this is $5,000 Achilles surgery on top of $7,000 of just destructive debt that is not productive, not doing anything for me. So I am laying in my aunt's bed because I can't stay at my house because I have stairs. So I'm at my aunt's house in my cast, elevated in the bed, reflecting, what is it that I'm missing? Because it wasn't the financial knowledge. It wasn't the financial literacy that I was missing. I had that. But there was something that wasn't connecting because I wasn't making any progress on my goals. And so I asked the question, I literally asked the question that day, what are the wealthy 1% doing and what do they know that everybody else is missing? And it came down to three things. Number one, business and tax strategy, because taxes are our number one expense in America. Number two, life insurance, because there's more than just death benefit, there are living benefits to life insurance. And then number three, I saw it everywhere. You need a wealth mentality. You need a wealthy mindset. You got to think rich, think like the wealthy do. And I saw that being written like it was common knowledge, but what I didn't see was, how do you build that wealth mentality? Exactly what is that made up of? And what is it about my current mindset that is not allowing me to experience this lifestyle that I'm desiring? And so that's what the quantum wealth theory is all about. It's all about the wealth mentality. Specifically, it's the neuroscience about how our brain is wired. It's the behavioral psychology about what drives us to or motivates us. And then lastly, it's the quantum physics, which is simply the study of energy at the smallest subatomic level, because our feelings, emotion, thoughts are energy and just as real as the physical things that we can see and touch that are also held together by energy, the particles. So I just wanted to give y'all that kind of preview to where we're going today, and also to just tell you how I got here and why I speak about this financial empowerment, speak about it differently from financial literacy, okay? Okay, so wealth mentality defined. I got these definitions from one of my first mentors, Rob Wilson out of Atlanta. I like to credit him because he was pivotal. I actually met him 3 weeks before I got surgery for my Achilles tendon. That's a whole nother story, but I limped around on my injury for a month before I went to the doctor, and I met him right before I went in. So a wealth mentality, it anticipates future financial obligations, and it understands that every unit of currency can build wealth. And notice that I said unit of currency, not dollars or money. And that's because what we're going to be talking about here is the other resources and currencies we have to spend in order to build our desired financial picture, which looks like our time, our attention, our focus, our energy. All those things can be spent to build your financial picture. On the other side, naturally, poverty mentality is reactive to life's happenings, and it believes it doesn't have enough to start building wealth, okay? Just simply put. So the question here is, are you the hero or the victim of your financial situation? That's an open-ended question. Only you can answer. Okay, so in our story time, we kind of touched on this analogy about the default program, but just wanted to go one layer deep and break it down one more time. So our brain is like our operating system. It's responsible for cataloging and processing all of our past experiences and beliefs. Our thoughts are like our remote control. They command what we're designing in our life. They command our actions. They command our operating system to process what we're putting in front of it. This not only includes your thoughts, but your words and your actions. Because we'll talk about it, our brain is unbiased. It doesn't pick and choose what it's processing and integrating. It just sees what you do, sees what you think, sees what you feel, and process that accordingly. And then lastly, our emotions are our fuel, and the heart is the engine which produces these feelings. And we're going to talk about how we use these to help propel us towards our financial goals. All right. So here we have a picture of what they call the triune brain model. Tri meaning three. So the idea is that our brain evolved over in three different sections. And so we have this red part down here, they call it the hindbrain or the monkey mind. And this is what's responsible for our instincts, our need to survive by any means necessary. Is responsible for some of these unconscious physiological behaviors like breathing, blinking, heart rate. And it's what ultimately drives our fight or flight responses, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so one more piece about that. And so the idea is back when folks were hunters and gatherers or cavemen, however you want to put it, when they were just on the savannah, all they were worried about was surviving. There was no entertainment. There was no, imagining and planning for the future. They were just surviving, hunting, killing what they needed to eat, trying to stay warm, try to keep everybody alive. All they needed was this part of the brain to make sure they survived. And so when we talk about fight or flight, they had certain threats like saber-toothed tigers, potentially popping up and chasing after them. And so when our brain perceives a threat, like a saber-toothed tiger, it is designed to get your body ready to either fight this threat, flight, which means run away, or freeze. And just depending on your makeup will determine how you react. And so while we may not have the same threat as saber-toothed tigers in 2024, we still have these processes in our brain that has us react in the same way. And so in today's day and age, maybe you get a text from a friend or a loved one that says, "We need to talk now." That message could send off some of those fight or flight responses. You may get a little sweaty, your heart rate, you wondering what they got to talk about, what happened. And so just keep that in mind as we're moving forward, because a lot of this money conversation can potentially bring up some of these responses that may not be helpful for you. And so when we talk about giving ourselves grace and emotional intelligence, we just notice them as they come up. We're not fighting it. We're not judging it. We're just noticing. Okay, moving on to the blue section. They call this the limbic system. And so this is the part of our brain that's responsible for our emotions now. We have the ability to imagine and to dream and to give ourselves rewards for certain behaviors. And it's ultimately what drives us to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And then lastly, we have this green section, which they call the neocortex. And they say this is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. This is our ability to have intelligence, to reason, to analyze and plan ahead. And ultimately, our complex language models is what this neocortex allows us to have. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of money? So I already talked about, I jumped ahead on how these stress triggers in today's age can bring up this fight or flight, even if we're not having the same threats. My survival and livelihood isn't actually threatened, but my body is still processing and sending me messages as if it is. And so talking about avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, depending on what your circumstances or upbringing were, sometimes just looking at the bank account and seeing what you spent and looking at the numbers and seeing and making your plans, sometimes that could be painful if that's something that you may not be comfortable with or unfamiliar with. And then seeking pleasure could be, you get home, you have some goals or some things you want to work on, but for some reason, your favorite Netflix series is just calling you to just do one more episode, but you have other things that you want to do. So in the next piece, we'll talk about what that means when you have one desire consciously, but somehow that subconscious wins over and you end up doing that thing. So there's this concept called money scripts. I learned this from Dr. Brad Klontz. I forget the name of his company, but Dr. Brad Klontz money scripts. If you Google that, you'll find more about it. But it's basically the idea, like I talked about with my story. Whatever you grew up hearing, seeing, experiencing, that becomes the program that you were wired with and ultimately what becomes your subconscious beliefs. So that's whether you saw your parents, not only what they told you and what you heard, but what you saw them do. That's your own experience. Whatever you experience could be adding to that subconscious programming. And then also your environment, your school, your friends, the TV shows you watch, these things were ultimately programming your subconscious beliefs. And side note, from ages 0 to 7, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's I forget what the type of science, but he deals with DNA and cells. He talks about from ages 0 to 7, we're just straight up in theta hypnosis state. And so we are just taking in every single thing that we see and observe. And that is ultimately what is the baseline of your default programming. And just to give you a preview, even though your 0 to 7 programming is the baseline default, it doesn't mean it's hardwired. We can absolutely reprogram our subconscious mind. I know you guys are familiar with this being in Tasha's group. And so we're going to talk about exactly how we update this subconscious programming. So beware of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive meaning brain, dissonance meaning disconnected. And what that means is, like we talked about with the Netflix example, if I know I have certain plans and desires and goals that I'm consciously desiring, but yet my subconscious beliefs and my subconscious understanding and programming doesn't align with these goals, and you think, okay, you know you have a goal to make $1 million next year, but if you know your parents never made $1 million and you never seen anybody do it, maybe subconsciously you believe it's not possible. And so that's why it's important that we deal with the subconscious to make sure that we are aligned. Okay, so we have some examples of popular sources of cognitive dissonance. Money is the root of all evil. Okay, I can't see y'all. Raise your hand if you've heard this term before. Okay, so like any good game of telephone, this phrase has been distorted over time. It actually comes from a Bible verse that says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." And so if we're here, we have business and personal financial goals, we're working on it. But if subconsciously you believe that money is the root of all evil because you haven't addressed that belief that maybe you were programmed with, then you're going to be spinning your wheels because you have this cognitive dissonance that's not allowing to actually move forward on those conscious goals you have. Debt is bad. Who's heard that one? Okay. So it just depends on what you're using the debt for. In the quantum wealth theory, I talk about productive debt versus destructive debt. And I think it's also important to emphasize here that we are all unique, 100% unique individuals. Just as our fingerprint cannot be duplicated, our financial goals are unique. Our experiences are unique. Our desires are unique. And so we have to be really mindful about this cookie cutter advice, like debt is bad, or if you're working with financial advisors and they're just giving you a template, do steps 1 through 5, but they never asked you what your goals are. And that's because for certain people, a purchase on debt could be destructive, but for somebody else, that same purchase could be productive if they have a plan to help them increase in value or make more income. And so bringing it back to financial empowerment, this conversation is to help us be empowered with our decisions, even if the people you're working with or around may not understand what you're doing because they don't have the goals that you have. A good job guarantees financial security. Who's heard that one? And so if the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us that this is in fact false, a false belief. And, you know, we all been through it. So I think we can move forward on that. So lastly, talking about the brain, the advertising game. There are companies that spend billions, I'll just say trillions if we accumulate it, over time to get us to spend and buy the things that they are selling. They know exactly the sounds to play, the shapes to put, the colors to use, the smells when you're walking in the store in JCPenney's and you smell the, Christmas smells. I don't know what the Christmas smells are. But they know exactly how to get your brain to believe that it wants, or to get your brain to be open and susceptible to the programming they're putting out. And so when we know this, number one, we can look at ads in a different light. I'll tell y'all one of mine. So I don't have any cable. I don't watch commercials. I skip, YouTube ads as much as I can, unless they're relevant. But on Hulu, I'm on my sister's Hulu plan, and they still show the ads, in the show. And so I just put them on mute. I don't look at them. I put them on mute. When the show's back on, I turn the volume back up. But I remember there was this one time, I don't know if it was on mute or not, but I saw like this Burger King Parmesan chicken sandwich, and it looked so good. I really don't even eat chicken anymore like that, but sometimes I'll flex. And I went up there like probably the next day on my way back from somewhere. It was late at night, got that chicken sandwich, and it was so nasty. The bread was hard, the chicken patty was hard. It was just like, I probably took no more than 2 bites and I had to toss it. It was terrible. And so for me, that was just a very defining moment, because I'm not going to let those advertisers get me anymore, especially not with that fast food stuff. That it's never what they make it seem. Okay. And so keep this in mind, because we talk about these ancient evolutionary forces in our brain that we're already dealing with. Let's be mindful of some of these people on the outside that's also trying to influence us. Okay, so instant gratification. I feel like this is a good time now to tell you guys that my name is Asia, and I am a recovering shopaholic. It was bad. It was really bad. Back in college, when I first got out from my mom's house, where I told y'all we had that poverty mindset where we couldn't have anything that wasn't essential. So by the time I get out on my own, I'm making my little part-time money. I'm just shopping any chance I get, Granted, I'm at, Ross and TJ Maxx. I'm not going crazy as far as the pricing, but frequently and often, I was just spending everything I had because I could. I'm reformed now, so I'm here to tell my story. So, dopamine and spending. Let's talk about dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which is just basically a messenger that our brain uses to send messages to our body to tell us how to feel. And so specifically, dopamine sends signals of happiness and pleasure. Happiness and pleasure. So any activity that we do that gives us that happy, pleasurable feeling, we are subconsciously motivated to repeat that behavior. Regardless if the behavior is good for you or not. If the chocolate cake gives you that hit of dopamine, let's talk about these examples. So sources of dopamine: sex, shopping, music, the smell of fresh cookies, likes on social media, hitting the jackpot, sunlight, and exercise are the ones I have listed here. And so I bring these up to understand, number one, some of these things that you experience because they give you that dopamine pleasure, you subconsciously just want to do more of that. And if you haven't recognized this subconscious motivation, then subconsciously, you'll just be continuing to repeat these behaviors. Again, not saying it's good or bad, because if your favorite dopamine source is exercise or sunlight or music, then you should be good to go. So just being mindful about what's driving our behavior is this underlying concept here. So how do we hack this natural dopamine reward system? So they did a study on some mice. They had them in a cage or a box or wherever they put mice to do experiments on them. And they were studying their dopamine response levels. And so the experiment looked like this. There was a signal that went off, which signals the mice to do work, which was to press a button 10 times. And after they pressed the button 10 times, there would be a reward, like a pellet or something like that. And so they would do this over and over. Signal, reward, work, reward. I'm sorry. Signal, work, reward. Signal, work, reward. And over time, what they realized was that the dopamine for these mice started to spike, not when they got the reward. The dopamine spiked when the signal went off. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that we get the dopamine spike from the anticipation of having the thing, not from actually having the thing. And so when I'm bringing it back to this shopping conversation, you know, when you're shopping, you're in there, you're looking for the cute thing, you found it, it fits good, you can see yourself in it, you want it right now, even though you might not necessarily have a reason, it's not aligned with your goals, you have other things you could use that money towards, you buy it anyways. But then you get home and for some reason, you don't feel that same happy, pleasurable feeling as when you did when you were shopping for it. Matter of fact, you might have a little regret or buyer's remorse, as they call it. That's because the dopamine wore off. And so keeping with this shopping example, a good hack would be, you know, you can go shopping, you know, pick up everything, look, put it in the basket, but you could also just leave that basket there. You don't have to buy the thing when you realize that the pleasure you got was just from anticipating and doing the bargain hunt. And so you can apply that to, you know, whatever your thing is, but just realize that whatever you think is going to bring you that happy and pleasurable feeling, realize it's the anticipation of it. So much so, I got one more example on this. We're going to call it now pleasant anticipation instead of instant gratification. And so the example I like to use is like, if you remember when you were younger, like, and you're about to go on a field trip or your parents are going to take you to the amusement park or something like that. For me, the night before, I would be so excited. Like I couldn't think of nothing else. I'm imagining what it's going to be like to get on the roller coaster. I'm sleeping in my clothes the night before because I didn't want to waste no time the morning of. I wanted to wake up ready to go. And the night before, even though we didn't have the experience yet, I was still happy about it. I wasn't sad that it wasn't here yet or that I didn't have it. I was pleasurably anticipating this goal or this future scenario that I was working towards. And so when we can tap into that, then we don't have to feel FOMO because we didn't have the thing, but we can actually delight in this future desire that we're designing for ourselves. Okay, now we're getting into some of this conscious versus subconscious. So the picture on the screen you see here is what they call the iceberg theory. Sigmund Freud came up with this iceberg theory to describe the 3 levels of consciousness. So you see above the surface of water, we have the conscious or the self-conscious minds. We call this the tip of the iceberg. This is where your current thoughts and perceptions are. Right now, you are consciously listening to me. You may even be consciously processing your own thoughts in the background, and you're thinking about what you're aware of right now. And then below the surface of water, we're going to split that big chunk of iceberg into 2 pieces. This subconscious is being split into 2 pieces. So right below the surface, we have the pre-conscious mind. This is what's responsible or where your past memories and past knowledge are held. And this is where you can tap into some of the pride and use that emotion that we'll continue to talk about. And so this looks like, you know, you can remember what you did last weekend for fun. You may not be consciously thinking about it right now until somebody asks you, what did you do last weekend? It's in your pre-conscious right there below the surface. So you can quickly reach below, capture that memory and bring it up to the conscious mind and tell them what you did last weekend. So that's right below the surface, your pre-conscious. Now we go all the way to the bottom, the depths of the deep blue ocean. We have our unconscious minds. This is where some of those uncontrollable urges or impulses come from. And sometimes some of the painful thoughts and feelings that come up that you didn't necessarily want to come up, and they come without your consent. And so we're going to hit this concept we're going to hit it from another angle, this 3 layers of consciousness. And that looks like the man, the lion, and the monster. The philosopher Plato, he had this idea of the tripartite soul. Again, we have that tri, that 3 number. And so his idea is there's the man. He is the conscious, logical being. He has the capacity to reason and plan. And then you have the lion, which is like that pre-conscious mind. It's what's responsible for your emotions and your pride, and what ultimately drives your behavior from that pride emotional stance. And then lastly, we have this monster. It's responsible for your instincts and your reflexes. And if you guys are noticing, we've talked about this same thing in 3 different ways. We talked about the triune brain model and the 3 layers. We talked about the iceberg theory and the 3 layers. And now we're talking about this man, lion, and monster. And so I like this analogy because of this reason. I'll tell you. So what happens when there's a piece of chocolate cake on the counter and you want it? What part of you wants it? Because the man may know that logically that's maybe not the best thing for you, or logically, you decided you had some health or some fitness goals and that's not going to contribute to them. Logically, you should not eat that cake. But what happens if you eat the cake anyways? What was that? That was your monster with its uncontrollable urges and impulses. And so the idea is the man can train the lion, just like a circus lion trainer. And together, the man and the lion, with your emotions and pride, can tame that monster. Together, your logic and your emotions can tame those uncontrollable urges. And so if we had to sum this piece up about the subconscious mind and the 3 layers, there are 4 points to help us sum this up. As the picture implies, your subconscious mind is a magnet to whatever your reality will be as you're designing it. So the subconscious mind, just like that iceberg, 90% of it is below the surface. It directs 90% of your behaviors. And so while you may have your conscious, bright ideas and noble goals, if you aren't dealing with your subconscious beliefs and patterns, then you'll be going against yourself. And that's why this programming is so important, because 90% of it is about your subconscious. Your subconscious is empowered by highly emotional events. If you wonder why certain memories stick out more clearly than others, it's likely because there is a high emotional state that was happening when you experienced that memory. And so we can manufacture or encourage our subconscious reprogramming to go deeper if we make sure we're attaching high energy to it. So whether that's doing jumping jacks, you want to dance, sing music, whatever your version of creating that high energetic state, do that either while or before you start doing your financial plan or, business strategy, whatever that looks like. Just know that when you're creating new subconscious beliefs, having highly emotional states will help you program those. Your subconscious consolidates information and converts it into long-term memory. We're going to talk about this process that creates subconscious beliefs on the next couple slides. But just know that it is unbiased and it just takes in the information and processes it as needed. And then lastly, this is what's going to bring us into that subconscious reprogramming system, which is the RAS, reticular activating system. Okay, let's get into it. So just a few highlights about this reticular activating system. As the name implies, it is a system. It does not know good. It does not know bad. Just does what it's designed to do. This reticular activating system, which is a combination of brain parts that's in the back, in the red part, that hindbrain, it's back there in the hindbrain part, which is where this processing happens. So it's the bridge between your conscious and subconscious mind. For example, we'll get into it when I describe the diagram here. It filters what's important. And what it determines as important is whatever you tell it is important, either by what your past experiences were or what you've been putting in front of it currently to tell it, okay, this is now important to me. I am adding new programming. Please go and find and process more of like this. And it is an unbiased process, okay? So let's get into it. So this picture here, you see the little sun up there with the squares and the triangle. I borrowed this idea. It came from, I was listening to something, they were talking about systems thinking. And they had this diagram. It was about something else, but the idea is there are inputs, which is number one. There's a process that happens, number two. Then there are outputs. From the outputs, you get feedback, and then you start that all over again, which becomes inputs. And this is the process of any system. And then, of course, the environment is going to impact all that. So in terms of the reticular activating system, let's talk about what that looks like. So number one, inputs. In any given moment, our brain is processing hundreds of thousands, millions of bits of data that you're not conscious of. And so if you look, well, to your left, you have a wall, for example. I have a blue wall over here. I wasn't consciously thinking about that, but trust and believe my brain is analyzing and taking in the information that's all around me, even if I'm not consciously aware. Bringing it back to the saber-toothed tiger example. You may be chilling on a Havana, minding your business, and then all of a sudden you see a little rustle of leaves in the bush over there. You weren't consciously paying attention to that bush, but your brain picked up that information, and because it perceived it as a potential threat, it brought that into your conscious awareness. So now you see it, you look. Another example, like if you see something crawling on the side, in the side of your eye, you may jump in reflex before you even realize what you're jumping for. That's because your brain is always processing information, whether you're conscious of it or not. And from that, it either categorizes it as relevant. If it's relevant, it either comes to your conscious mind or is validated against your current subconscious beliefs, or it's not relevant and it just casts away the information. It doesn't process it or bring it to your awareness. Now we get to number two, this process of validating this information against your current beliefs. So if your current subconscious belief is money is the root of all evil, and then you have an input that comes in where somebody's telling you that they make $5 million a year, if you haven't dealt with that subconscious belief that you believe money is the root of all evil, you may be discounting what this person is saying or subconsciously judging them or not able to learn from them because you believe they may be evil because you haven't dealt with that. So it's not going to bring it into your awareness, and potentially this person could help you get to your goals. And so it either accepts or rejects the input information. That's the process number two, beliefs. Now we move to number three. If this belief is rejected because it is either unfamiliar, it doesn't match with your current beliefs, or there's no proof in your environment that this is true, then it just releases the information. But if it is accepted because it's validated against your current beliefs, or it knows that this is important to you now because you're doing some reprogramming work, then it produces an emotion or brings it to your awareness to allow you to do more of that. And so I'll give you one example. So I always use the red Volkswagen Beetle. Let's say you're thinking about it, you're looking it up online, and then all of a sudden you start seeing red Volkswagen Beetles everywhere, on the road, on the TV. They didn't make more red Volkswagen Beetles and put them on the roads now. They were always there, but you didn't tell your brain that was important to you until you did. And so now your brain is designed to go out and search for confirmation or validation of what you're programming it to believe is important. And so from that output is decided whether it's important or not. Now you have feedback. And so that feedback looks like your behavior. If you're receiving inputs, you're telling your brain this thing is important to me, and then now it's time for you to act on it. If you act and go along with that and start to make the phone calls, do whatever you need to do to reach your goals, and you're confirming to your brain at another level that this is important to me, because you're giving it the feedback that this is important through your actions. But if you receive this new information because you're doing your new programming, but then you still act as if the old ways or the old programming, then it's going to discard it because you just told it through your actions that actually this is not that important. And then again, that feedback is now inputs because you're doing the actions, and now that's more information for you to continue this cycle and this process. And arguably, most importantly, this environment will impact all of that processing. And so keep that in mind, because environment is not just where we live, but it's what we're listening to, what we're seeing, the situations we're putting ourselves in. Remember, a lot of this work and processing goes on below the surface. So even if you're consciously not affected by certain things, understand that there is some subconscious processing going on there. So I mentioned it before, from ages 0 to 7, this process is happening all the time. You're full-blown theta hypnosis. So this reticular activating system, it creates subconscious habits in order to optimize energy. Remember, our bodies are financial vehicles. We're just looking to optimize by any means necessary. And subconsciously, that is happening all the time. The example of driving a car. If you remember when you first started driving, you had to consciously think about every little thing. Okay, hand at 10, hand at 2. Okay, mirror, this foot here, pull this foot off. Okay, if you got a clutch, you're doing that. You're looking in the mirror. You're very conscious about what you're doing. It's methodical. But after 10, 20 years, you driving one hand, you on the phone, you're eating your burger, you're putting your makeup on, you drive home, you don't remember how you got there because you zoned out. That's because your reticular activating system created a subconscious habit out of driving. So you no longer have to consciously think about how to do it. And just for that example, it shows you that you can create new subconscious programming after the age of 7, obviously. So when we talk about motivation and alignment, being intentional with what we're programming our subconscious with will allow us to have more of that motivation and alignment with our visions that we're bringing into picture. Now, I say the word vision, you'll see why. I use the idea of the North Star vision, which is your ideal lifestyle 5 years into the future. And we'll get to that. I don't want to jump ahead because we're doing good on time, y'all. We're kind of almost done. Okay, so again, this reticular activating system either reinforces your existing beliefs or it creates new beliefs by repetition or emotionally charged thoughts, behaviors, actions, feelings. Oh, okay, so I know Tasha's driving, but I forgot I added a few extra slides for this group. So we're either going to run over if it's cool, or we'll have a part 2. So we'll see what they say.
You think you need a little more time, you're saying?
Just a little bit, maybe about 10,
All right.
15 minutes.
Well, if persons are okay with it, it is being recorded.
Okay.
And therefore, if they're unable to stay, then we'll have it in the recording.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because I know when Tasha and I talked, this specifically was one of the concepts that she wanted me to bring to you guys. Okay. So quantum physics, the study of energy at the smallest level. We talked about that. Everything down to the smallest nucleus and every photon of light is made of energy. In our universe, we have physical matter like the computer, the table, the chair. It's made up of particles being held together by energy. Our thoughts, emotions, and feelings also emit an energetic signature. So just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not just as real as the physical things we can see and touch. And so just to bring some context into it, there's classic physics, which tells me if I drop an apple from the top of a tree, it's going to fall down to the ground at this rate. It'll get there by this time, and I can calculate it to know because this is classic physics. And to overly simplify what quantum physics looks like in that scenario, I drop the apple and it doesn't fall straight down. It actually does the zigzag to the left and then falls down over there. And so what they're studying quantum physics, when they look at the behavior of particles and energy at this subatomic level, they realize it doesn't behave as they thought it would based off classic physics. And so we're going to talk about how that relates to our money goals and how we can impact them in a way that may not necessarily have to be linear. So there are 3 concepts to this money science that I'm going to bring today. In quantum physics, they talk about the wave-particle duality, which basically describes the behavior of the units of light or the units of energy. Every single thing in our universe can be explained as either an energetic wave or a physical particle. The example is H2O. That is 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Those are the particles. And so if water is H2O, steam is H2O, ice is H2O, what's the difference between these 3 forms? It's the energetic vibrational frequency. That's what's different. It's the same particle of matter, but a different energetic state. And so this is just one way for us to understand the power of our energy and our emotions and how it affects physical matter. So how does this wave-particle duality relate to money and wealth? You see this coin here, price and value. I'm calling that 2 sides of the same coin. Price is a universal measurement of money. Everybody can agree this computer costs $1,000. That is the price. On the other side, value is a unique opinion based on your individual needs and circumstances. While the computer may cost $1,000 in price, the value would be different to each person depending on what they're going to use it for. So the price is like the physical particle. It's external and you can calculate it like your physical currency, versus the value, which is like the energetic wave, and is based on your internal valuation based on your unique desires. So example here is like a bottle of water. You can walk into the bodega and buy this bottle of water for, let's say, for $3. Now take the same bottle of water and go over to the Sahara Desert where somebody's been stranded for 3 days. The price may be $3, but what is the value of this bottle of water to that person who's been stranded for 3 days? They will tell you what that value is, but it's likely more than $3, even if you want to use dollars to quantify value. Number 2, attention currency. Why is attention so valuable? They use the term pay attention. You wonder why Facebook and Instagram are free services for us. That's because the companies and advertisers will pay millions of dollars to put their ads in front of our eyes because our attention is that valuable. So in quantum physics, there was this experiment where they come to this idea of the observer effect, which is defined as the disturbance of a system by observation. Disturbance of a system by observation. So they did an experiment where they were shooting the photons, particles of light, through double slits, and it was behaving in the weird way that we talked about. Quantum physics, they were trying to figure out why was it behaving that way. They put an observing tool closer so they could behave those particles closer. And once they started to observe these particles, they started to behave a different way. They started to change their path. And so what this tells us is, well, number 1, the quantum universe holds all possibilities at any given moment. What makes a reality makes your reality real is your focus and attention on that reality. It materializes from your observation. So how does this relate to money and wealth? So money remember that's like the price. We define that as any article or substance used as a medium of exchange. It is a measurement of wealth. It is a means of payment. On the other side, when we're talking about wealth and value, wealth is defined as the state of being rich or prosperity. I should probably change that to prosperous. Wealth is an abundance of money, possessions, property, or natural resources. You see the language here? There's a distinction between money and wealth. In our energetic state and how we feel about it is important, but also keeping in mind that we are all unique and individual. And so everybody likely will have different versions of wealth and success. So just some examples just to bring it home. Money is easily quantified. Talking about cash, digital bank accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cryptocurrency, real estate, insurance policies, business assets, and real property. Versus wealth, which is not so easily quantified. It is freedom, peace, joy, experience, knowledge, ideas, clarity, skills, discipline, willpower, and health. And then the third piece, you are the bank of energy. We talked about our bodies are our financial vehicles. And so we have the power to generate the motivation, the discipline, the clarity needed to reach our financial goals. So Sir Einstein said, E equals MC squared. That is energy, E equals matter times the speed of light squared. And like any math equation, what you do to one side impacts the other side. And so whether we're talking about managing our energy when we're earning, spending, investing money, and being mindful of how we feel when we're dealing with money, or we're dealing with the money itself, the matter, and the speed and the action when we use it, realize that both sides impact each other, which is just one more way to say how, or to share why we need to be mindful as we're having these money conversations and just paying attention to the energy and the feelings that come up when we're doing it. Saying all that to say, when we appreciate all forms of value, money, and wealth, we start to have this exponential impact on our financial goals when we realize we're not just focusing on the singular physical fiat type of money. All right, so energy in motion. Does that sound familiar? Does it kind of sound like emotion? And so this chart here, I got this from David R. Hawkins in his book, Power versus Force. And you can see here at the bottom, or on the left side, they talk about the Hertz frequency, which is the power of the emotion or the frequency. And so you can see at the bottom, guilt, shame, fear, and grief. These are not very powerful emotions. While they may feel almighty and powerful when they're coming up and feel like it's taken over and you can't do nothing about it, and you'd rather just succumb to it and give up, they're not as powerful in terms of driving our behavior as peace, joy, love, and acceptance. And so as we're continuing to make progress on our goals, be mindful of the energies when they come up, and remember this chart to help you understand why it's important to cultivate those feelings of peace and joy and love in everything that we do. All right, so say we got about 7 more minutes and we'll be good. So we're going to talk about emotions. We're going to break those down one good time. So there's 4 aspects to this emotions. Number 1, there's the mental aspect. We talked about our brain is always processing information. And so it's bringing in information, and then all of a sudden, one of the inputs makes you feel an emotion. That's because the emotions originate from your mind. It's a continuous flow of thoughts, feelings, interpretations, and memories. And so at some point when your brain recognizes a situation or event, it recognizes it against your past beliefs. It now triggers an emotion because it's saying it's important because it's validated against your current experiences. And so now the brain sends that signal to your body. Now you have this biological impact of emotions. Now you're starting to feel the physical sensations from it, or the feelings. So whether that's your heart rate, you got sweaty pits, or your stomach's tied up in knots, whatever the experience is that your brain processed, it's now translating that to a bodily function. And then the third layer, now based on that bodily sensation you now behave in a certain way. You either express that emotion or you repress it. And then lastly, it emits an energetic signature, a vibrational frequency that is training all of the cells in your body. And also I would like to say here, well, I'll say it on the next slide because it's on there. But just keep in mind that Dr. Bruce Lipton, he does study on epigenetics, and it tells us that we have the ability to turn on and off certain genes because our cells are impacted by our emotions and the vibrational and the frequency that's all around it. All right. Brain-heart coherence. So I'll say this here. So stress and heart health. I talked about money energy and how you feel when you're earning, spending, saving, and investing. The reason why that's important is because in our society as a whole, heart disease is the #1 killer in our society. And financial, they say chronic stresses is the #1 contributor to heart disease. So that's stress over time constantly. That's chronic stress is a contributor to heart disease. And they also say that financial challenges can be a chronic stressor, especially when experienced over time, over generations. And so in that case, one might conclude that financial challenges could be one of the things that's taking people out, if not checked over time. And so on top of wanting to be healthy enough to enjoy the wealth and the riches that we're building, being able to experience peace and joy as we're building it, because you may not always have on the material plane what you're working for now, but going back to that pleasurable anticipation, you've designed your North Star vision clear enough, you are excited and you are pleasurably anticipating that. And so day to day, you're not letting those stressors come to you and take you out. You're actually flipping that and making sure that you're tapping into some of those positive emotions. So brain-heart coherence. There's an organization called the Heart Math Institute. And they've been doing study on the heart. And what they found was that the heart is basically like a mini brain. I say mini, not because it's less powerful, but mini because even though it has neurons and synapses and it can hold memories and communicate, it sends out information and receives information just like the heart, just like the brain does. And so for simplistic reasons, let's say the brain thinks, it's commanding, it's sending out the information, while the heart feels, it's attracting the information. But they both do both of them. And so what they found was that the heart is actually 60 times more electric, means it can send out signals 60 times stronger than the brain can. And it's 5,000 times more magnetic than the brain as far as bringing in what is important, what's aligned with it. And so if you imagine your aura fields, if you know the energy signature that's all around you, this is what's creating that. It's your heart and your mind constantly sending and receiving information that's important and that it's attracting to it. So some other side effects or side benefits to having brain and heart in alignment. Let me tell you why that's important. Because if your brain and your conscious mind is planning for these financial goals and you have your business plan, you know what you want, but your heart feels like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it. My parents never did it. I'm not seeing progress. If your heart isn't in that peaceful state that feels like it can, then again, that cognitive dissonance or the incoherence. And so when your heart is aligned and you feel good, you know you can do it, your brain has the goals, then here are some more benefits to having brain-heart coherence. Reduction in stress, more adaptable to change, more physiological well-being, higher cognitive capacity, performance improvement, resilience and problem solving, mental clarity, emotional stability, better access to intuition and creativity, regenerative process and anti-aging. So these are the benefits when we have our brain heart in coherence. Okay, promise these are the last 2 slides and they're quick, because now we're going to sum this up, because this North Star vision is arguably the most important concept, because when we talk about our financial goals and wealth building, we know that people don't want green pieces of paper. When they say they want more money, they don't want green paper or digits on a computer screen. They actually want a feeling or experience. They want, my theory is, they want love, peace, joy, and freedom. And so if we can get super clear about what we actually want in our North Star vision 5 years into the future, then we can reverse engineer and create a plan towards that. And not only do we have a better plan to what we uniquely want, and we're just not going for the American dream because that's what they told you you're supposed to have, but you paint that picture clearly enough and vividly enough, like, you want to wake up and smell the beach in your beach house. You want to eat the breakfast tacos in the morning. You tapping into your 5 senses, because our brain doesn't know the difference between a future imagined scenario versus the past memory. It processes the information the same. And so when we could tap into that North Star vision, we can tap into those emotions, that peace, love, joy, and freedom, and use that to empower us day to day and say no to the shopping basket when you need to. Talking to myself. And so what this looks like practically is there are 4, I call them lifestyle customs. When you're designing your North Star vision, and I have a PDF handout that'll help you to walk through the process of designing your North Star vision. So there are 4 areas to it. Your health and self-care. This is your peace. How do you want to experience your health and self-care? Your family and friends. This is love. How do you want to show love and receive it? Your fun and passion. What does your joy look like? And then lastly, money and business, whether this personal development, career development, business, investing. This is your freedom. What does that look like for you? And lastly, keeping in mind when we're painting this North Star vision that there are unlimited possibilities. When we're designing this ideal lifestyle, we're not looking at it, okay, I make X amount of dollars today. This is what's logical for me to get in 5 years. Forget logical. We're talking quantum here. And so we're painting this North Star vision with a clean slate. We know our subconscious beliefs may be coloring our decisions. And so dream big, put out whatever you want, because even if you don't, what they say, you shoot for the moon, you land on the stars kind of thing. Paint your ideal North Star vision exactly as it feels ideal to you. I talked about it already. I couldn't help myself, that your brain doesn't know the difference between a future scenario and a past memory. So again, more reason to be very clear about the emotions, the feelings, the smell, the sights, the sounds of this North Star vision, so that when you're day-to-day making decisions, you can recall that scenario and feel those feelings today. Pleasurable anticipation. And then lastly,
Asia,
yes, ma'am.
this is Coach Lisa. So thank you so much for being on with us today. We have another call that starts at 12 and we need to let those ladies in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I hate to cut you short, but if you want to just do a quick little wrap up for us. And then of course, we will share your contact information and etc. We might should have broken this into 2 parts for the ladies. I'm not sure. But we are going to have to wrap this up. Oh, and you got all the comments too. You have comments in the comment section. Not sure if you saw those, but yes, just wanted to let you know that.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect. So clarity and confidence is key. It is unique to you. Other folks may not understand what you're doing. So as long as you're clear on your vision, you could be confident and move forward knowing that you know exactly what you're working towards. And so lastly, the activity, make sure you guys get the PDF to help you paint your North Star vision. And then the last page, or the first page of that, is a list of 20 discussion topics for you to have with your family. I actually designed it for the young adults to ask their parents, just to learn about their programming, to facilitate conversations, but it works either way. Talk with your friends, talk with your family, talk with your kids. just a list of discussion questions to start bringing some of those subconscious ideas up. And that's the end.
Thank you, Aisha.
Thank
know
you
this
so
was a-
much. That was amazing. That was a lot of information, a lot for us to process. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
a
you.
lot. I know one of the key ones for me, and I see Tasha put it in the group as well. People don't want more green pieces of paper. They want more love, joy, peace, and freedom. That's a big yes. And I get that. It was a lot of information. I know we have a lot to process and think about. As soon as the replay is ready, we will send that out. So you'll be able to look at that. And it is like I said, phenomenal information, Aisha. Really
you guys
appreciate
for
all of it.
allowing me to go over a little bit. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you,
Awesome.
guys.
And
Until
so
next
what I would recommend based on our time and where we are right now time-wise is that once we do the replay, you can post some questions underneath there if you need to.
Yes. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
and we will share them with Aisha so she can answer them for you.
Awesome.
Hey, ladies. I've
Tasha.
got airport noise in the back, but I just want to say really quickly, if there's anyone here that has contact with high school, administration or anyone in any universities and college, please reach out to Asia and make that contact for her. She's really passionate about this, as you can see, and that's her ideal audience for sharing this. I think my 50-year-old self learned a lot. And I'm sure we all did, but really that's her target audience. And if anyone can make any contacts for her, I'm sure she would be very, very grateful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Goddess Asia.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah.
Happy wealth building.
Oh, thank you, Aisha. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Are my queens, my goddesses. One love from my heart to yours. See you soon.
Bye, ladies.